Genesis chapter 8. I am going to read this for us, and then we'll discuss. Genesis 8:1. And Elohim remembered Noah, and all of the beasts and all the cattle that were with him in the ark. And Elohim made a wind pass over the earth, and the waters subsided. And the fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were stopped, and the rain from the heavens was withheld. And the waters receded steadily from the earth, and at the end of the 150 days the waters diminished. And in the 7th month, the 17th day of the month, the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. And the waters decreased steadily until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains became visible. And it came to be at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made, and he sent out a raven, which kept going out and turning back, or your translation may say going to and fro, until the waters had dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove from him to see if the waters had receded from the face of the ground. But the dove found no resting place for its feet, and returned into the ark to him, for the waters were on the face of all the earth. So he put out his hand and took it, and pulled it into the ark to himself. And he waited yet another 7 days, and again sent the dove out from the ark. And the dove came to him in the evening, and behold, a freshly plucked olive leaf was in its mouth. And Noah knew that the waters had receded from the earth. And he waited yet another 7 days, and sent out the dove, which did not return to him again. And it came to be in the 601st year, in the 1st month, the 1st day of the month, that the waters were dried up from the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark, and behold, and he saw the surface of the ground was dry. And in the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. And Elohim spoke to Noah, saying, Go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every life form of all flesh that is with you, of birds, of cattle, and all creeping creatures, the creeping creatures of the earth. And let them teem on the earth, and bear and increase on the earth. So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him, every beast, every creeping creature, and every bird, whatever creeps on the earth, according to their kinds, went out of the ark. And Noah built a slaughtering place, or an altar, to Jehovah, and took of every clean beast and of every clean bird, and offered ascending offerings on the slaughter place. And Jehovah smelled a soothing fragrance. And Jehovah said in his heart, Never again shall I curse the ground because of man, although the inclination of man's heart is evil from his youth. And never again strike all living creatures as I have done, as long as the earth remains, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. So that is Genesis chapter 8. We have the end of the flood scene, and Noah coming out of the ark with all the creatures. Now we have some interesting things going on here, I think. Number one, do you note the similarities to the Exodus with the water and the wind? It seems to me. I mean, you see, I see some similar language to not only the creation story, where there's, the waters, over the surface of the deep, and the spirit hovering or fluttering or something over the face of the deep. And then you've got, what's interesting is that in verse 1 it says that Yehovah made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters subsided. It reminds me of the language from the Exodus, where an east wind came and split the Reed Sea in half so that the children of Israel could walk through it. So those three stories are somehow, they seem interconnected to me in some way. And the rabbinic commentary does indeed tie all three of those stories together as either creation or recreation accounts, all three of them. And I think that the language and the imagery that is used in this section is definitely reminiscent of the creation account. Do you guys see that? Do you believe
There's actually, I can show you every day in this whole chapter. It's pretty cool, actually. And then into chapter 9, you get the Sabbath with the Rainbow Covenant. It's almost identical to Exodus 31 and the Sabbath Covenant.
Yeah.
But
really
like here, day 1, I think you mentioned God made a wind pass over the earth and the waters subsided. So the Spirit of God moved over the face of the waters. That's day 1. Right after that, and the fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were stopped, so that the waters above and the waters below. Day 2. And then day 3, we've got, I think down in verse 11, Dove came and brought back the olive leaf. So we've got trees. And then this is actually, Rabbi Foreman was walking through this, and he couldn't figure out what the sun, moon, and stars would be. But I think it's Noah and his wife and his sons, as David, you, Noah, are the sun, your wife, the moon, and your sons are the stars with you. So I can see that as day 4.
Sure.
And then day 5 and 6, below that, fowl talks about the creeping things, so the birds and then the creeping things. But man, it does talk about them in that sentence as well too, because I know man and beast were made on day 6 as well.
Yeah.
But then going into chapter 9, I think, goes into the Sabbath.
Right.
And that's going to be pretty cool to see.
That's an awesome insight. So I think we all seem to agree that there's definitely some connections here. Do you have any ideas about why that might be, or what does it signify?
I have something, I just, in my head, I know we talked about the possibility of something happening between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. That when Yahweh makes this rainbow covenant and promises never to flood the earth again. And this is exactly, it's not exactly, but it's very similar to that story. To me, that's going, okay, did he flood it twice? I don't know. I just thought that was interesting, though.
Yeah.
Where are you talking?
In the Rainbow Covenant, when he gives the promise of the rainbow and then says a promise never
I
to
thought that
flood
was
the earth.
after.
Yeah, it is. It's coming up in chapter 9. We haven't read it yet.
Yeah. I think, the similarities, in light of what you've just said, Tracy, regarding that potential gap theory, in between Genesis 1 and 2, does, in my mind, to some degree, in some mysterious way, denote some type of judgment that happened before the earth was restored in Genesis 1:2. And that we have the same type of thing here, that frankly you can also see some of that in the Exodus story, and you can see it again in the book of the Revelation, where we got this, things are destroyed and then renewed, and destroyed and then renewed. It seems to me that God is making it known that he intends to judge the earth, that it is his purview to judge the earth if things get out of control. And that he, Peter tells us in either 1 Peter or 2 Peter, I'm not remembering which, that, this is a sign to the ungodly that God has preserved the world for fire this time, and that he fully intends to judge the unrighteous on the earth, and that this stands as a reminder to us.
And Messiah says it's in the days of Noah, so that what has been is what will be, and I think we can see that even from the creation. We see that here with Noah's, and again, it's just
keeps repeating itself.
And if this count is lined up with the yearly count and not just the count of how long Noah was in the ark, then you have this summation and it resting during tabernacles.
Yeah.
Like this finale and a renewal.
Yeah, I agree. And I had some questions in here regarding the dates that are mentioned, and I was like, I don't know what to do with that exactly, because it doesn't line up perfectly. But it seems like right in the middle of the Feast of Tabernacles in one part, and then another part it's like a second Passover.
right,
you know what I'm saying?
Second Passover.
So I'm like,
Also too, I think it's interesting. It's a 5-month period that we're given there, and that's in Revelation. It talks about this locust army or whatever being given authority, or
Right.
Satan or whatever giving authority for 5 months.
Right.
I think perhaps there could be some kind of connection to that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what exactly, but something for us to be watching for. It does span that time of summer when, Messiah says that learn the parable of the fig tree, the summer is near, and all that. So there could be some kind of clue there.
Absolutely.
And you've got like, if we're comparing it to the creation and God calling certain days good, the numeric value for Tov is 17. So the 17th is when it rested.
That's
and
interesting.
Messiah ascended on the 17th.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. So, take a look at the book of Numbers for just a sec. I want to bring something to your attention. You probably are aware of it, but just wanted us to review this for a second because it kind of goes along with what we've been talking about here just a second ago. If you look at the book of Numbers, chapter 31, starting, let's say, verse 21. Numbers 31:21. This is after Moses is about to die, and he gives the children of Israel this military campaign to go and essentially take retribution against the princes of Moab, or Midian, excuse me, for the incident of Baal Peor. And the Israelites go up against the Midianite kings and go to battle. And they come back with gold and silver and iron implements and human slaves and animals and all different kinds of stuff. And they have some concern regarding the ritual purity of these things. And it talks about passing some of the things through fire and some of the things through water. So in verse 21 it says, "And Eleazar the priest said to the men of the campaign who went to the battle, This is the law of the Torah which Yehovah commanded Moshe. Only the gold and the silver, the bronze, the iron, the tin, and the lead, every object that passes through fire, ye shall put through the fire, and it shall be clean. Only let it be cleaned with the water for uncleanness. And whatever does not pass through the fire, you pass through water. And you shall wash your garments on the seventh day and be clean, and afterwards come into the camp." So there's a concern here for ritual purity regarding having gone out and gone out to battle with the Midianites, and also bringing in the goods from the Midianites that they had captured and making sure that those things are ritually clean, both the people and the implements of precious metals and the animals and everything. But there's a principle here, the Torah. This is the law of the Torah, which was commanded to Moshe regarding the purification of things. And it's kind of interesting if you look at the rabbinic commentary from like Rabbi Samson, Raphael Hirsch, and Rashi. It sounds remarkably similar to what Paul said about our works being tested so as through fire. You know what I'm saying? If any man builds upon the foundation with wood, straw, stone, hay, stubble, gold, precious stones, that the day will reveal it, because it's to be tested through fire. I think that that's really connected here, and I wanted to bring it to a bit of a larger level, looking at this earth being judged here through water, and yet again being judged through fire at the end. Do you see any connection with these things?
I was just thinking.
Please.
I don't know if I should share this or not. It's just interesting to me that, like what you're saying, and I've thought about that too with the works that you're building, that they will be tried by fire, and if they cannot stand. Paul also says, though they themselves will be saved.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly what that means, but if we consider if the water is the word or the Torah, And Messiah had to speak of earthly things to teach you these things, and the Spirit maybe being more like the fire. I don't know, because I know the water is also likened to Spirit, and the fire is also likened to the Word too. So
Sure. Yeah.
but there seems to be some kind of order. So I don't know if whatever you're doing is not going to withstand the fire. You got to go back here and you got to be washed.
Right.
You got to learn this or
Right.
something.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking. We were talking about the hierarchy and the tabernacle, and that's the picture of the heavenlies, and perhaps there's some kind of learning that needs to take place. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
It kind of brought a picture to my mind of, the earth was cleansed by water here. Now, the earth was cleansed of humanity through water in this episode. You can generally wash, they're not going to put, like in this example from Numbers chapter 31, they're not going to put the human slaves and the animals that they brought from the battle through the fire. They can wash them with the water of purification, but this is a little bit more than that. Tracy, what do you
It's
got?
the flesh.
Yeah.
Because that's what he says when it says that all flesh was destroyed. It uses that word flesh over it, and again,
Right,
it seems
yeah.
right before the flood and
Right.
about the cleansing of the earth.
Okay.
There's some kind of flesh cleansing, and I think baptism represents the cleansing of the flesh.
Yeah.
And but then the fire is something else, I think.
Now, if the human body can be cleansed by the flesh can be cleansed, if you want to look at it that way, then what is being cleansed by the fire? The spirit.
Yeah.
The spirit is being cleansed by the fire.
Right, because flesh and blood can't inherit, so
The soul or the spirit?
Yeah. What?
The soul or the spirit?
Both. Both could be cleansed by fire because they're not tangible. They would have to be cleansed by fire because they can pass through the fire. Which is an interesting metaphor in regards to all of the fire talk that you have in the New Testament. And I heard one teacher say that it's like the earth was cleansed by water of humanity in this instance, and that the soul will be cleansed of the earth in that instance. That earthliness, worldliness needs to be cleansed from the soul in the end days, and that the earth was cleansed of humanity through water in these days. It's an interesting back and forth picture with cleansing of water and cleansing of fire.
And I'm just started looking into something right before we got into this, but I started writing about it because I hadn't seen this before. And Isaiah 33, it said something that was interesting to me because it says it's talking about who can dwell with a consuming fire, and who shall dwell with everlasting burnings, who can withstand everlasting burnings. And then it starts to tell you, one who speaks uprightly, who despises the gang of oppressions, who shakes his hand free from taking a bribe. All these things that are considered righteous, and then it matches up with Psalm 15. Who shall dwell in your tent, in your tabernacle? And I think even says tent.
He who has clean hands and a pure heart.
Right. So this is what he says in Deuteronomy. Yahovah, I'm a consuming fire. It's the same word here. Who can dwell with that? You have to be like him to dwell with that. And that's what the goal is. You have to be a fire. We're supposed to be burning lamps, torches.
Right.
Messiah says, I come to bring fire on the earth, and what if it were already kindled? I think that's a picture of us being these firing lamps. And he knows his bride by their light when he comes back. So if you are like him,
Angela,
fire
the office door.
won't consume you because you will just burn brighter.
Yeah.
I just think there's something to that.
Oh, I totally agree.
And it's that everlasting burning that they talk about Revelation. Is that really this everlasting torturous burning, or is it? This is my conclusion: is that it's not the wicked that are going to be burning. Everyone's going to be burning. Whether you can dwell or withstand it is the question.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, there's a lot of mysterious stuff there, and I don't know that we can say definitively, but there's enough there that really merits further study and discussion.
And the picture of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, one was with them like the Son of Man, they did not burn, they were not consumed. But yet the wicked who just came close to it. And that's what I think God's holiness is like.
Yeah.
You can't come near it. It's like that fire. If you do,
Yep.
you can't.
A burning bush that didn't consume itself.
Yep, it's all related.
Absolutely.
They did that.
Who did that?
The Raiders of the Lost Ark.
They
melted.
Yes, they did. That's funny. I
If Keith were
actually
here,
watched
he would have
that.
said that too. He's a movie guy. He would have said something about that, I bet. She wants to show me her
The
toy.
thing is that I think of, and I doubt that I'm the only one, is that when it's talking about gold, silver, and precious stones, wood, hay, and stubble, it's talking about whether we did our things for the Lord, and that's stuff that will last through the fire.
I agree.
And things that we did in the flesh,
Mhm.
even if they're good things,
Mhm.
they're still not going to last.
Absolutely.
Those dollar bills are going to stay
You
there.
can do a lot of good in the flesh.
You
I mean,
can.
it's
And
not.
it's not
It's
bad.
not redemptive.
Well, Paul even says that
It isn't
all
bad.
the
it just
knowledge
isn't
is going to be
qualified.
burnt up, the works are going to be burnt up. What remains is love.
Right.
So it's what's this your inside? What are you doing? Love your neighbor as yourself and love the Lord your
Right.
God. I mean, that's
Right.
why it's so important, because that will remain.
Yeah, what you do out of love will absolutely remain, and that's a challenge, because it's so easy to do things. You can so easily do good deeds in order to be seen by men, and have people look at you in a certain way. Feeding your ego, your ego, that part of your soul, your Well, we remember you and I, Angela, were talking about that a couple of weeks ago regarding the nefesh and the neshama. Where the nefesh, that soul has a connection. It's kind of like the bridge that is connecting the flesh with the spirit, and that the lower order nefesh is kind of like your baser instincts. It's like I want to drink, I want to smoke, I want to do drugs, I want to have sex, I want to do the things that are totally flesh. But then there's that higher order neshama, or nefesh, which is like, I want to feel good about myself, I want to feel important, I want to feel intellectual, I want to feel smart, I want people to look at me in a positive light. Those are not fleshly exactly, but they are still very fleshly, appearing to be smart, or having people look at you in the right way, or something like that. I mean, you can even, some people might be, like health food nuts, and it can even be a fleshly thing. To be, really concerned with your flesh. And I just, with that discussion that we had, it really brought home to me how we are very much consumed with our flesh. Yeah, our flesh is...
How we're feeling.
Huh?
How we feel.
How we feel is one of the higher order nefesh things, but it's still part of the flesh. I mean, it just really hit me how the flesh is such a powerful thing, and that we don't even realize how powerful it is, and we're feeding it all the time, and it's really difficult to put those things aside and do something out of selflessness. That's really challenging. It really is.
The Lord is good to point it out, though.
What's that?
I said the Lord is faithful to point it out when you're doing it, if you want to hear it. Because
If
it's
we're
like,
not thick enough.
the Lord will kind of give me a little nudge and say, this isn't about you.
Yeah, and we need to not be thick, because we can real easily trick ourselves into thinking, we can real easily become Pharisees and Sadducees, like doing our things to be seen by other people. That's a
Search me,
struggle.
O God, and know my heart.
Or even not necessarily to be seen, but checking our motivations. Are we just looking at this as a checklist?
Right.
Okay, here I've done this, I've done that.
Because then it's your flesh checking off the checklist.
That's right.
It's like,
That's
You
right.
know,
it's
it's
not
not,
gonna work in
it's not
you.
making other people feel good about you, but it's making you feel better about you, which is just the same thing.
And I think that's where a lot of confusion comes with Paul's writings, because on one side people think he's saying, see, you're not supposed to keep the laws. That's not right. On the other hand, it's him saying, yeah, you are. You know, it's because he's trying to say it in such a way that it's Messiah in you that does the work. It's the faith that you have in him, that you allow him to wash you in this word and do the work. It's coming from a different place. It's not you making a checklist. And it's easy to do if you get too much in your own head and you try to figure this out instead of just putting your own desires and thoughts aside and say, teach this to me.
I think you can really, like, we all have baggage, right? When we come into something, and you can see Paul's baggage. He's like,
Oh, sure.
I was a scholar of scholars. I was doing this by the book, right? Don't be like me. Let me teach you how you're supposed to do this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the picture, like, it's just this really cool thing just kind of dawned on me. I saw it before, but it's just more clear. Is that, you know, he's teaching that we're to establish the law. And if you take that back to, he's not saying we're no longer under the law. He's saying we're no longer under the law of sin and death. And if you take that back to our example of the Exodus, and by faith, Israel put the blood on their doorposts. They believed God and they did it. They didn't do anything other than believe him and put faith in the blood of the Lamb. By God's grace, he saved them and redeemed them from man's slavery of men and from their sin. So there's your law of sin. He brings them into the wilderness to himself, and then what does he ask them to do? Establish the law. And that's what we're supposed to see from that is Messiah. We believe in him by faith. We are covered by his blood. He saved us. We are no longer under the law of sin and death. Now what do? Because of him, we establish the law.
We passed through the water in between those.
Yep.
And cleansed the flesh, and then went to the mountain, which was burning with fire. So at that point,
Yeah.
he's purifying the other part of us.
It's pretty neat.
Yeah. Really neat picture. Yeah, awesome. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the dove and the raven. It's kind of interesting stuff. Notice that, and I think we discussed this just a little bit when we were talking about the construction of the ark. I think that was in chapter 6, that the window of the ark has the dimensions of 1 cubit by 1 cubit. And that is a rather specific measurement, which is also replicated in the golden altar of incense. And the rabbinic commentaries on this, the construction of the ark, because I know we were talking, a couple of weeks back about this, any kind of symbolism that we could find, and Mike did that little paper, or Keith took your information and put it in the paper. I don't remember how that occurred, but we were talking about the construction of the ark, and if we saw any spiritual principles, in the actual construction of this giant boat. And one of the things that we noted was the window of the ark was 1 cubit by 1 cubit, which is rather small for a boat that is, a football field and a half long, to have one window, which is 1 cubit by 1 cubit. It must have been rather dark in there, frankly, or he had a lot of light.
But that one thing we heard that said that the word for window was it?
Zohar?
Yeah, it was almost like somebody was theorizing that the window was putting out light, that it was a light source, not.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and that's, if I remember correctly, that's the only place in the Torah where the word Zohar actually occurs. That was kind of interesting.
What?
That it was like a fixture, like a source of light, not just a.
What's a cubit?
It's 18 inches. Basically the tip of your elbow to the tip of your finger. Yeah, 18 inches approximately. So there's a window in the ark which is this big.
They use that word in other places to represent like high noon, like the brightest part of the day.
Right. It's a curious phrase. So it's not. It doesn't just appear once. Is that?
Right. It's in some other places.
Okay. That's the word Zohar?
But it's interesting because in chapter 6 it's Zohar, and then in chapter 8 it's a different word.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting.
Why they
Yeah. There's something there.
It's Zohar, but when he sends the bird out of it, it's
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I think that what's curious, and when some of the rabbinic commentary, when they interpret the ark and the window and the raven and the dove are obviously going out the window, right? I mean, they're not. He hasn't taken the cover off the ark, and that door has been shut. It says that God shut it himself. I'm assuming it's because it was rather large. And we've all seen, maybe children's cartoons or something. It's like there's this giant door, and the power of God shuts the door because it's just too big for Noah to handle.
I heard Grant talk about that word "shut in." It's the same word that it uses when he stitches Adam back together after taking his side.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, looking at maybe the correlation between this window, which is 1 cubit by 1 cubit, and the golden altar of incense in the tabernacle, there's a connection there with prayer, because the Psalms talk about incense your prayers could be like incense going up on the altar, and so that's why when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, that the Jews basically decided, we can't offer sacrifices anymore, so now they offer prayers at the same time of day that the morning, evening, and afternoon sacrifices would have been said. And so they make a connection between prayer as a sacrifice, and I think it's totally legitimate, since King David in the Psalms mentions that our prayers are like incense going up. But they have actually brought together some ideas regarding the raven and the dove being like symbolic of prayer. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Then I'll read for you what the suggestion was, and you can let me know if you think this is interesting or has any merit. Number one, he sends forth a raven, which is an unclean bird. The raven, also, the Hebrew word for raven is oreb, right?
What?
Oreb? Almost like Horeb or Erev, like we say evening.
Yeah, it's like Arab, I thought.
Yeah, it's a really similar, it's the same spelling as Erev, like Erev Shabbat, that when the sun is going down in the evening.
It's like that mixing.
The mixing of light and dark. Yeah, absolutely.
Because the word mixing is also Arab.
That's right. Absolutely. So it's kind of interesting. And what they have suggested is that the raven is a confession type of prayer offering, where you're confessing sin. You have released an unclean thing. You're releasing, you're confessing sin and repenting of sin with your prayer, and that raven represents something unclean going out of that 1 cubit by 1 cubit window as a prayer of confession of sin. It's an interesting idea. Now, the first time that he sends out the dove, you've got the dove goes out. You notice what happens here. He says the dove did not find a resting place for his feet and returned back to him, but not with any word, not with anything, nothing came back. I mean, the dove came back himself, but there was no word there. They kind of liken that to, this could be representative of a prayer that goes out and doesn't come back fulfilled, so to speak. This could be maybe like this reminded me, the rabbis wouldn't say this, of course, but this reminded me of like Paul's prayer, where he prayed, 7 times to have this thorn in his flesh removed, but God did not grant his prayer because that thorn in his flesh was there for a reason, to keep him from exalting himself. So they would suggest that maybe this is a type of prayer that you are praying out to God, and he is simply not answering your prayer because you are not seeing something that he's doing in your life. I also put in here that it also could be that according to the passages in James about praying with misaligned motives, that the dove going out the window and circling around and then coming back without any good word is, us praying for maybe things in a misaligned way. We seek and we don't get because we seek with, impure motives or something like that. I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, dove number 2 that goes out and then comes back with a freshly plucked olive leaf, that seems to symbolize that the prayer returns answered, as evidenced by the freshly plucked olive leaf. It may be according to what we have asked and expected, or it may be otherwise. The prayer is answered, but it may not be answered in the way that we expected. And then the dove, of course, leaves through this window for the third and final time, and it does not return. Could be, this one had some really convoluted type of logic, which didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. They were kind of saying maybe this was a type of prayer of praise or worship that goes out and goes up to God and blesses God in some ways, but does not return. I don't know.
I liked Angie's thought in Matthew that it returned when it came to the Messiah.
Yeah, I totally like that as well. I don't know what the connection is, but I liked that connection, that it was like it went out and it looked around and it came back, and then it went out and found a fresh leaf, and then it came back, and then it went out again and didn't come back, and then it came back again when Yeshua was getting, immersed in the water.
The theme seems so much like that. The raven and the dove almost seem like a first and second Adam. First Adam, where he tried to failed.
When
And
he?
then, let's say God is trying to make a connection here on this earth with these people, and he had that in Eden, and then he didn't. So Adam is like a raven, this unclean thing. There's really no place for him to land himself in that world. But then the dove comes along and kind of
rekindles that.
It's funny because I don't know if there's a connection to it or not, but when the second time, or the first time he sends out the dove, it says that she didn't have anywhere to find a soul rest for the sole of her foot. And it reminded me of Messiah said, the Son of Man has nowhere to rest his head.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I just am thinking that maybe
Well,
first
what-
man out,
the
second
whole
man out.
dove going out and then returning, because he came here and then returned to the Father.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the olive leaf and the whole idea of him making peace
Mm-hmm.
between that connection that had been severed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that idea.
Is
Great.
there any harm in looking at it, in your opinion, that the raven was sent out, they're scavengers. By then, there was obviously some dead bodies and dead whatevers lying around and floating around that he could feed off of.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't need to come back directly.
Yeah.
Also, Noah and his family could not see the ground from where they were at.
Right.
I mean, the window was up
Right,
there,
right.
and all this other stuff was 3 stories below, or however far boats sat in the water.
Mm-hmm.
So they couldn't see how much water was out there and what wasn't. So this was God showing them when you can go out and when you can't,
Mm-hmm.
when you can expect to be getting a relief from this
Yeah.
closed-in thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
Also, with the dove, she couldn't put any place, and a dove will not feed where she can't stand,
And they
or
want
a perch.
right.
And
Yeah.
so, when she came back, this was a second time, 7 days later, and she had the olive leaf in her mouth, that means that there was enough ground out there that an olive leaf was showing up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is giving them another little, I'm still with you, I'm taking care of you, but not yet.
Right. Right.
And then when she didn't return anymore, well, she didn't need to come back. The Lord had provided enough to sustain her.
Right.
Is there any harm in just looking at it? at face
No,
value?
absolutely not. I mean, and I think that there's plenty to look at on just a flat surface level here, which makes a lot of good sense, and I think that that's totally valid.
And when you and along that same line, it comes through my mind when we talk about the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve sinned, and the destruction or the penalty or the punishment, if you will. There was an angel set at the gate of that garden, at the entrance, and nobody could go in. Nobody. not the animals, not anybody. I would think that was pretty horrid. I mean, I think of me going from where I live now and how I'd like to have this and I'd like to have that, but I am very well taken care of by the Lord. And my little sister-in-law over there in the Philippines, struggling, and she has the Lord, but she's not learned yet how to really, really rest in Him. But at the same time, if the Lord required me, because of my own actions, to go and live into that situation, that would pretty much be devastating for me.
Yeah.
Physically and emotionally.
Sure.
And I picture that in my mind for Adam and Eve. They knew what they had had with the Lord.
That must have been devastating.
And it was gone.
Yeah.
Lord have mercy.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would have been absolutely. That would have been.
Praise the Lord for His work.
Yeah. Absolutely.
An awful lot of times I'm learning to appreciate what we're learning here, but at the same time, the Lord really has blessed me over the years with being taught just the basic. Not that you ought to stop there. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying.
Oh, sure.
I don't like to lose those.
Sure.
Very basic. This is what it says.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I wrote a nice little section here to myself, just on a real basic level, regarding the raven and the dove. I put that the raven is an unclean bird of carrion. It may be that Noah was following a possible tradition of sailors. There are stories of, some of the earliest seafaring stories that we have of the Norsemen and stuff says that they brought, little cages with ravens on their boats, and they would send them out. And if they just kind of circled around, they knew that the raven could, with its excellent eyesight over long distances, could not see any land, and so it would just come back. But if they saw it go up and then head off in that direction, they knew there's land over there, because the raven can see a good long ways further than we can, and they would just follow where the raven went. It could be that basic, that he was aware of this and just sent out the raven to see where it would go. It could, what was also curious to me is that it also could be symbolic of some type of evil. I mean, it just feels some type of evil, some kind of darkness. One of the things that caught my attention here is this translation, and that's why I mentioned when I read this to you guys that your translation may say that the raven went to and fro. If you notice, that's a rather peculiar Hebrew phrase there. Now, it says that and I'm pretty sure you'll have to look at this, and you might be able to do that now. The dove actually apparently went out and didn't find anything, but it doesn't use the same Hebrew phraseology to say that this dove went to and fro. And the only other time which I could find in my Bible where it talks about somebody going to and fro, do you know what I'm talking about? Job. When Satan appeared before God and God said, "What have you been doing?" He says, "I've been going to and fro." So I thought, okay, that's rather curious that the words to and fro don't appear much in the Bible, but where they do might be significant. Satan wandered to and fro on the earth in the book of Job. And then in the book of Daniel, it describes people going to and fro in the end days. Those are the only two sections that I could find where it used that same Hebrew phraseology of going to and fro.
Well, it's just because he could go out and eat and come back to go to sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what, and I put that this is an unclean bird of carrion, and there probably would have been many dead things that a crow can just land on, a raven it can just land on and eat. It doesn't need land or a perch in a tree to put its foot down. But I also read in the rabbinic commentaries that a dove will not land in quote unquote an unclean place, which is kind of what you were indicating, which I thought was very interesting. And Paul, in the New Testament, it shows Paul in Ephesians says that we are not to be tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. Also, if the ark and the scene which Noah are taken as a picture of the kingdom, this could have a parallel to the parables of Yeshua regarding evil infecting the kingdom, where if we see darkness, birds in the trees of the mustard plant or whatever, and the good fish and the bad fish and the tares coming in among the wheat. I don't know. I just saw some imagery there. I'm not really sure. The dove in this story is also very curious because the dove is mentioned very rarely in Scripture. The other references are to the cooing and mourning sound that they make in the book, like in the books of Isaiah and Ezekiel, or in the Gospel of Matthew when the dove comes down on Yeshua. So it's a curious thing. I'm not real sure what to make of it, but it's definitely interesting. I also thought that it was interesting regarding how much waiting Noah did. I was reminded of that when you were talking a second ago, Grace, where it's like he would send out this dove and it's come back with an olive leaf, and he knew that the waters had dried up from the earth, but he waited another 7 days. And then he sent out the dove again, and it didn't come back, and he waited another 7 days. And God finally said to him, come out of the ark. So I don't know. Part of me said Noah was afraid to come out of the ark. he was like, I'm perfectly fine here. I'm safe. I've got my food. God has provided me this ark of safety, and I'm just going to stay right here. It also reminds me of God's place of protection, and you just don't do anything without hearing from the Lord. And when the Lord finally did speak up, he says, okay, come out.
I was under the impression, I don't know if this is true or not, but that because he sealed the door that only he could open it, and that ties in with the door that Messiah can shut and no man can open, and open and no man can shut.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah. I hadn't thought of that. That's a great idea. Yeah. So yeah, I think I like that idea. I don't know. That's certainly possible.
Also, if they had like a pulley system or something like that, so he could have shut the door, it would have put him in charge of when is the door shut and who is left out and who is left
Sure.
in.
Sure.
It was Yahweh.
God took it.
God
did it.
That's right. That is absolutely right. I mean, it does say that God shut the door and sealed it. That's a good, excellent point, Tracy. So I think he waited for God to tell him it's time to go out of the ark.
It's a good example to me.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. Do you have any other ideas or any other commentary that you have regarding the dove or the raven or anything like that in that section?
With your idea about it being prayers sent up, and
that's not my idea. Don't lay that one out. No, I'm just kidding. I found that in the rabbinic commentary. I thought it was interesting. Tell me.
I thought, because I was doing a quick compare between the word fro, to and fro, between this and Job, and it's different.
Is it?
Slightly.
Okay.
And this one is more of a return, like shuv, like repent. So maybe that's where they got that idea of the raven going to and fro being compared to like a prayer.
Yeah.
Sent up.
Yeah, that could be where they got that. That's a great idea. Yeah. I like that. Yeah, I don't know if it's entirely valid, but what you have said maybe lends it a little bit more credence. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Do you guys note this first occurrence of the word altar and the word offering and how God responds to this? Now, I thought, we had an altar in the beginning of the book when Cain and Abel made a sacrifice, but it actually doesn't use that word. There's no altar. It just says they made an offering, and it's not the same type either. I think that was a mincha, which is what that Cain and Abel did. It was like a Thanksgiving offering or something like that. But here, when Noah comes out of the ark, he builds an altar, which I believe is the Hebrew word mizbeach, and then he offers up an olah, which is a whole burnt offering. And this is the first time that these are mentioned in the Bible. Do you think that these, is there anything that you think this might signify or that is significant in some way? I mean, it's the first mentioned. Do you guys find anything significant about this?
I just wonder if it's related somehow to the fact that he's going to now allow them to eat flesh. I'm wondering if there's some kind of connection to that. I don't know though.
Yeah, that could be.
They couldn't eat flesh before that.
Yeah, that's coming up in chapter 9. Is that he's basically given permission at this point to begin to eat meat.
And that's that whole Romans 14 debacle. You know how people think Romans 14 is about you can eat any meats. There's no unclean or clean. But I think he's using Greek words that differentiate between being a vegetarian and being a meat eater. Mm-hmm. And I think that's valid in my head because people might go, well, see, back in here in the beginning we were vegetarians, so we should be vegetarians. Mm-hmm. And so, but then he's saying, well, no. I've made a provision, you can eat meat. So I think that's actually the argument. Yeah.
And I have a question about that regarding that in when we come to the next page here, looking at chapter 9 about, why that is. And I can't answer it, but
God doesn't consider the unclean animals even edible at all. They're not meat, they're not food for human consumption. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very curious.
Which has been very hard for me to remember.
Well, in regard to this altar, I think, we remember some of the things when we did our Torah studies, regarding what an altar is. And I mean, what is your conception of what an altar is? In a basic mundane sense of what is it and how do you build one and what does it have to be constructed of? 2, all the way up to the more spiritual idea of what is an altar for? What is its spiritual significance? Do you have anything that you would say in that regard?
I don't know how they're built. I don't think that it's terribly important at this point in this day. Back then when God gave us specifics and we were physically doing altars and doing all of this. But to me it's more spiritual now. It's like,
well, I like that you said that, but I want
to.
Yeah, and I am interested that you said that because I wanna, obviously an altar in these days and in the Old Testament in general was a very important thing. Now, of course, we know that many believers, followers of the Bible or whatever, have misconceptions regarding animal sacrifice and what they're for and such. So I know that we have done some research into that and have purified our own ideas in that regard, that we're not talking about, all of these animal sacrifices are to take away sins, because that's just not the way it works. But an altar is very, very significant in the Bible. And now that, the temple was destroyed 2,000 years ago and we don't have any altars, and we're told not to build altars just any old where that we want, except for the place that he chooses to put his name there. What significance does that have for us at all today? I mean, Mike, do you have any ideas about what is the significance of an altar in general?
I always thought of it as a connecting place, kitchen table, where you all get together, and of course there's meat and grain on the table, just like there's meat and grain brought to his table. And it was a place where you could connect with him. Mm-hmm. And as far as literally, I was under the impression most of the time it was a pile of rocks.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pile of rocks. I mean, yeah, if you look at I think it's in Exodus 20 where God says, if you're going to build an altar, it has to be of uncut stones. What's that? Uncut. Oh, yeah, uncut stones. You can't defile it with your iron tool or something. Now, I looked at some of the rabbinic commentary regarding altars, and they were like, well, it can't be you can't put a pile of rocks or something on top of little pillars or arches or anything like that. It has to be in connection to the earth, piled up stones. You can't do it on a single stone. It has to be piles of stones that are uncut. You can't, chisel them or defile. It says that you would defile them if you cut them in some way or broke them apart to make them fit better. I don't know. Or just a mound of earth, of the earth that is shaped into, some type of shape.
Wouldn't you be saying, if that's the connection point for God to connect to earth, and you're acknowledging that he is the creator of earth, but then you decide you're going to cut his stones because he could have done this a little better. That's just arrogance.
I think that was definitely my impression. Even a long time ago when I read it, it was like, yeah, if you're trying to connect heaven and earth, in a sense, is what the rabbinic commentary talks about too, is that this altar is an elevation of the earth to the heavens, and that the things going up on the altar are a connection point between heaven and earth, and that you are sending up you've probably heard this before in some of the teachings maybe that you've listened to regarding a whole burnt offering, for example, that oftentimes it's definitely true in rabbinic commentary that a person who brings a whole burnt offering is, remember that they're putting the whole animal aside from, a few small parts. You're putting the whole animal up there and the whole thing goes up in smoke. You're not eating any parts of it. The priest is not eating any parts of it. The whole thing is going up in smoke. And that is likened to, which is interesting in light of the New Testament, that the rabbinic commentary suggests that a whole burnt offering, which is what Noah made here, is called an olah, was representative of the offerer, the person putting this on the altar, symbolizing, I am offering you myself. I am going to pretend in my own mind, you don't accept human sacrifice, and I can't throw myself on this altar and burn myself up, but this animal represents me dedicating my life, everything that I am, to you. It's going up. And I think that's a really interesting commentary in light of the New Testament scriptures, which talk a lot about that. Us dedicate us being I think what I remember the words that Paul used as it being our natural and good sacrifice or something like that.
God, which is our reasonable service.
Yes, exactly that. So that Noah, and my understanding is that this is a way that Noah took of elevating the mundane to the holy. And that there's so much that God requests of us in order to elevate the mundane to the holy. Like, for example, like you were talking about a minute ago, Grace, regarding food. When we make distinctions between what is clean and what is unclean, we are elevating something really mundane, eating food, to the holy. When we set aside the Sabbath day and say we're not working on that day, we're taking something as simple as counting of days and elevating that to a holy level, saying we do make distinctions between clean and unclean, between days that are set aside for our God and regular old ordinary work days or something. And so an altar would be an instance of elevating the mundane to the holy. I don't know, you guys picking that up?
I think there's definitely a connection to the altar in the mouth. I mean, there's quite a few scriptures. I was just looking at a few of them. And even Isaiah, I'm a man of unclean lips, and he takes the seraphim or somebody, messenger takes the coals and puts it in the altar, puts it on his lips.
Yeah.
And that our tongues are like fires, and I was just looking at a bunch of different scriptures that I think that relate the mouth somehow to.
Absolutely.
And I think in Hebrews he talks about we have no continuing city, so let us offer the sacrifices of our lips or the fruit of our lips or something like that. So
I think there's a lot of scriptures that really connect offerings to praise, prayer, that the mouth. It's like, well, I mean, it makes sense in a weird kind of spiritual sense too, that the words that are coming out of your mouth are intangible. They're, I guess you could say they're going up. I don't know, but they're coming out. You can't see them. They reveal what's on the inside.
And they're the unique thing about humans that we are given that
It's a good point.
ability to not just communicate, because animals will make noises, but to communicate abstractly with words and concepts and things like that. There's no animals that can do that.
Yeah. Good point. So I think there's a good case to be made to connect altars and offerings to the words of our mouth, and especially in regards to praise and prayer. And, that's... what do you guys think of the idea of the Jews substituting the sacrifice system as a way to fellowship and make offering to God at these certain times of the day when God prescribed those things, that the Jews have now substituted prayer during those times for the sacrificial system? Do you think there's any credence to that?
Yeah, and I don't think it's not something new, right? They had the example of that from Daniel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And David too.
I don't think it's bad. I think that if in their minds this is bringing them closer and more acceptable to God, and yet they're denying His Son,
Mm-hmm.
then it's not effective at all. But if, as Daniel did, it was a form of worship, and God sees the heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting, like, seeing these examples earlier before a tabernacle and temple, how, they were supposed to be done in a specific place where God put His name, but we've got these examples of these things kind of happening in different key places, but in the book of Genesis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like the idea of what you guys were discussing about these rocks not being made of man's hands,
Mm-hmm.
and that neither are we.
Right.
And we're this kind of new temple.
Yeah, we are living stones, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. I think that there's a good case to be made, that we should be praying. I mean, that we are advised so much in the New Testament to pray, and I know that I am not a good prayer, if you want to put it that way. I don't know what the proper word for that would be. But, just being diligent in my own prayer, I mean, I would talk to my children and, encourage them to pray to God, And, they get busy and they're playing and they're having a good time. And I just tell them, I just want to continuously encourage you whenever you get an opportunity to talk to your Father in heaven. I tell them, you and I would not have a good relationship if we didn't talk. You would know that I love you and I would know that you love me. But if we don't talk together, then we're not going to have this strengthening of that relationship. We're not going to know each other quite as well. We're not going to know each other's hearts and minds. The more that we talk and communicate with each other and share ideas and thoughts and feelings, the more we really get to know each other and grow to love each other. And I think prayer has been a really either neglected or misunderstood part of our faith for so long. And I think that there's conflict. It's been also conflicting for me because I look at certain passages in the New Testament, like Paul saying, pray without ceasing. Now I know that he's not talking about like praying continuously, but praying continuously, not like uninterruptedly, but praying continuously all the time. And then Yeshua, saying, you're giving them this model prayer, the Our Father who is in heaven prayer, and asking for daily bread, but then in a few passages earlier saying, why do you concern yourself about bread? That's always been a little bit confusing to me. It's like, what are we...
It's a different bread.
Yeah, that's a good point. What is...
I wonder with you made me think about this whole offering being representation of ourself, right? That it's this whole, it's everything, right?
Yeah.
All going up, nothing being returned. And that kind of reminds me of the conversations that we've had before about the difference in Jewish prayer, where it's not, hey, can you help me out here? But what kind of prayers are you doing at these times of days that are substituting the sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the idea, and I know we've talked about this before, the idea of liturgical prayer, you know, that's like canned, prepared, it's in a prayer book. I mean, the Catholics have that. Jews have that. Christians have never really had anything like that, as far as I know, aside from the early days of the Catholic Church. But since the Reformation,
What's the Hebrew word for prayer?
Tefillah,
Yeah, that's
tefillah, like.
I've been wondering for a while if we have a misunderstanding. It's like we think of it as a telephone conversation. Well, kind of one-sided.
Sure.
And I heard somebody say once, and that when you look at the Lord's Prayer and think about pray continuously and the liturgical stuff that they do, it seems like it's more about aligning, because he knows everything I'm thinking. He knows everything I've said. So I have to tell him or he won't know me. And everything he said is here. It's not imaginary thoughts in my head where I have to guess whether that was my thought or he was putting something in my head. It's right here.
Sure.
So is it more about aligning yourself with his will? Because that's kind of what the Lord's Prayer says. And these liturgical things, it's really you getting your mind right and in the right groove.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what we're supposed to be doing continuously, not sitting there just
Yeah.
talking, you know.
That's interesting too. Yeah, I agree. Tracy, you said something?
I was just looking at the Hebrew word. It's tefillah, and it comes from the word halal, which is pei lamed lamed, to intervene, interpose, to pray.
Where do you see that used first? Where is it used first?
Halal is used first in Genesis 20, verse 7.
Is that where Abraham prays for Sarah or Isaac?
Therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for you. And
Oh,
you shall live,
Abimelech.
And
Shared his life.
know thou that you shall surely die.
That was when-
Abimelech rose early in the morning and called his servants.
Yeah, okay.
Gave Sarah back to
That's
her
right.
husband.
That's right.
I've never seen that.
Gracie, sorry, what were you going to say? I apologize.
Oh, I know. Like what Angela was saying, I think sometimes we get into a thing where we kind of, the Lord is there, we know he's there, but unless I have a need, I'm not going to bother him. That isn't what he wants.
I agree.
My husband doesn't want me to only talk to him when I need something.
Right.
It's the communication and the desire to have open communication and open minds, even if he's in the Mediterranean and I'm in South Carolina with the kids in military housing, we still have communication with our hearts. And the more communication that we share with each other, the greater the love that we grow.
Yeah.
But when it comes to our Father in heaven, there's a huge, to me, place for worship and praise. Not because of what he's giving me, but that is part of it.
Sure.
Not because of how fortunate I am to be in the situation where his Holy Spirit opened my spiritual eyes so that I could even partake of it.
Yeah.
Not so much that, oh, I don't have to be so worried about this because I'm born again, blah, blah, blah. But because of who he is, what he is, what he's done, what he is doing, what he's capable of, and trying to get a grasp on that, and just edifying and glorifying and praising.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Tracy?
that will help in the troubled times too.
Good point. Tracy?
The first use of that word tefillah is in 2 Samuel, and he says, and let the house of your servant David be established before you, and he says, therefore has your servant found in his heart to pray this prayer unto you. So it's a little example of what a prayer is. And now, O Lord God, you are that God, and your words be true, and you have promised this goodness unto your servant. Therefore now let it please you to bless the house of your servant, that it may continue forever before you. For you, O Lord God, have spoken it, and with your blessing let the house of your servant be blessed forever. That's a good example of what a prayer is.
Yeah. You know, I was kind of when I began to kind of studied Jewish prayer, and I actually bought a little, what they call a Siddur, which is a prayer book, liturgical prayer book. I was kind of surprised because so much of this, literally like 95% of every prayer in that entire book is just praise and worship of God. It's extolling his attributes. It's telling him how awesome he is, and saying, you've made these promises to our ancestors, and you're so faithful to your covenant, and you're so awesome, and you help your people, and a lot of them, a good chunk of those are simply psalms. They're just praying the psalms. And I think it was Grant Luton actually talk about when Yeshua was on the cross, that he was saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, He was quoting from the Psalms, and they thought he was talking to Elijah or somebody. But some scholars were positing the theory that Yeshua was actually praying the Hallel prayers from the Psalms. He was quoting Psalms, or not the Hallel, because that's a different section, but he was quoting some of these Messianic Psalms from between Psalm 22 and Psalm 31, that they had, because of the things that he said on the cross, including that phrase, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, that he, and some of the last things that he said, they posited a theory which was kind of interesting, and it seemed to make sense to me, that the entire time that he was on the cross, he was quoting Psalm 22 through Psalm 31. And you can see certain of the phrases that he spoke lining up really well with those psalms, and I thought, that's interesting. That was certainly interesting. But I was a little bit amazed when I began to learn about Jewish prayer and what it was in their liturgy that they were saying. And Angela is absolutely right that Jewish prayer is really about aligning yourself with the will of God, recognizing who he is, what he's done, what he continues to do, and just lining yourself up with that. Now, I had spoken with you guys in the last several weeks about this book that I've been reading about faith by that Rabbi Shalom Arush. Now, he has something interesting which I was not aware of, but he says, you should definitely pray those liturgical prayers at the morning, the morning offering and the evening offering and such like that. Yeah, that's fabulous, and that's according to Jewish law that you're supposed to do that. But he actually suggests strongly that you devote an hour a day to personal prayer where you are pouring out your heart to God, telling God about. But what's so weird about it is that he is lining this whole hour of personal prayer, and it's some weird Hebrew word like hitbodadut, some weird word that I had never heard before. It's perfectly in line with Romans chapter 8, where Paul says, all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. This hour of personal prayer that this rabbi is talking about is all about Romans chapter 8. Where he's talking about praying for a solid hour, just telling God exactly what is happening in your life and the things that are troubling you, and thanking God for whatever he has brought into your life. He suggests if you're sick, if you are having financial difficulties, if you're having relationship troubles, thank God for those things, because he's brought them into your life for a very specific purpose, in order to teach you something. Either you need to repent from some sin that is causing this issue, or God's trying to, correct you in some way. It's just weird to me that this rabbi was talking about this, and it just lined up so perfectly with Paul's teaching regarding just everything works together for good. And it was very interesting. It was very encouraging. And I've actually tried it, and I think it's a really neat thing. He's talking about it. You need to confess sins and make your requests known to God, and thanking him for all things, giving thanksgiving for everything that's in your life, whether it's a blessing that you're overjoyed about, or whether it's something that's really troubling you, you don't know what to do about it, thanking him. Thank you so much for bringing this into my life. That takes real faith to be able to say, this really crappy thing that is happening in my life is wonderful. Thank you, God, that you brought this to me because I needed this. I don't know how or why yet, but I believe that everything that you have brought into my life or allowed to happen to me or whatever, however you want to put it, is there for a very specific purpose to teach you. And that's an interesting thing. It takes this verse in Romans from Paul a little bit further than I had been considering. I thought it was interesting.
Where do you get your prayer book that you have?
The art scroll, I think, is the one that I have. There's really, there was a video that I watched about some, Tim Hague from Torah Resource. His son was on the video talking about different types of Jewish prayer books. And he was talking about basically there's only 2 or 3 of them that are like the most popular ones in the whole world. One of them is the art scroll. And the other one is, I can't remember what the name of that was. And then he just had a smaller one that was made by Art Scroll. I bought a little Art Scroll one, which is, it's really cool. I mean, when there's sections in there for prayers that are to be prayed on Shabbat. There are sections in there for prayers that are to be prayed for sick people. I mean, when my dad's wife was dying, I brought that thing with me and I read from it exactly. It's just Psalms. Mm-hmm. There was a whole bunch of Psalms that were, strung together that have to do with entrusting your soul to God in difficult and trying circumstances. When I went to visit Jerry, these last 2 times in the hospital, I was reviewing my prayer book with those Psalms. In fact, I took those same Psalms from the prayer book and I put them into a bookmark list on my hand Bible here to have, to just listening to them on the way to go and visit Jerry, because I know that these Psalms are so powerful. I know that the Psalms have been a powerful influence in my own life when things have been challenging for me or something. A Siddur? Siddur.
I know, I can find them on Google, but I don't know which ones you're talking about.
The Art Scroll.
Art?
Art Scroll. It's one word, crammed together.
Art Scroll Siddur?
Mm-hmm. That's that book that I have, the Stone Chumash, was also published by Art Scroll.
Yeah,
Art Scroll is
I don't know the difference.
Art Scroll is a big publisher of Orthodox. Yeah, that's one thing about these Jewish books; they're backwards.
They're actually we're backwards.
We're backwards, yeah. Anyway, I definitely recommend looking into Jewish prayer. It's a very fascinating thing. A lot of people are uncomfortable with canned prayers. I totally understand that, but it is what it is. Anyway, you guys ready to wrap up?
Yeah.
Have a little snack time? Excellent. Let's pray.